a film industry capable of satisfying both the critics and the box office. One which tells us, as Australians, what it is to be Australian, and which by doing so tells the world as well.
What is Australian? I guess to the world, Crocodile Dundee is Australian.
The way Australia is perceived, it's as if there's us and there's them, you know, which is so dangerous.
Well, then you look at them and you think, oh, that's really bad the way they portrayed them, isn't it? And then you think, hey, that's me.
Sometimes I haven't been dark enough. Sometimes I haven't been Aboriginal looking enough. And I say, well, you'd have a heart attack if you saw some of my friends from Broome.
And I go to auditions and they say, oh, you don't look Chinese enough. Well, what do you mean I don't look Chinese enough? My eyes are not like that.
I'm third generation Australian. And people have to accept that you don't have to be Anglo-Saxon to speak with an Australian accent.
What is an Australian? An Australian, or Australians are people who come from many different backgrounds now, and we have to start showing that on the screen.
How do we rationalise what we are here? How do we come to terms with an environment which we stole, which we murdered to get hold of, and to which, in a sense, we sort of always knew we really had no right?
I think to think about representations of blackness and ethnicity in early Australian cinema, one is inevitably thinking about a deep public concern about whiteness at the same time.
One of the ways the Australian cultural stereotypes have developed is through simply removing, for instance, the fact that the Aboriginal experience totally from the agenda, and then portraying the country as a very tough, unforgiving, harsh, demanding land, which takes a, quote-unquote, a real man to subdue and survive in.
Whereas in so many images of the time, blacks encumber the earth, they move in circles, they don't in fact produce. The land is mysterious because the blacks are simply part of it, they don't work on it, they don't produce out of it. The whites, in contrast, move in a productive and linear way across it.
Looking at a lot of early Australian feature films, I noticed that there was actually a lot of material with Aboriginal people. For example, a film made in 1920 called Girl of the Bush, I think is a perfect example of Aborigines seen as the savage who pestered and killed white settlers like a nuisance, similar to American Indians in cowboy films, in Hollywood cowboy films.
This is a shot from Romance of Runnibede. The evil witch doctor type villainous leader of the blacks. They have just captured the white woman. They are dissembling, slippery and violent. The Chinese, on the one hand, are like the Aborigines insofar as they are devalued insofar as they don't labour. You get sequences in The Birth of White Australia where fairly gross Chinese try to steal a horse and fail in fairly dismal and ludicrous ways, so that they're associated with thievery.
And going with a general kind of racism that was specifically directed against the Chinese and that was quite virulent at the turn of the century, that Chinese become the carriers of evil. They're into all kinds of nefarious practices, including white slavery.
One other film I discovered was called The Enemy Within, made in 1918, where an Aboriginal boxer, a real-life Aboriginal boxer called Sandy McVie, actually plays a detective's right-hand man.
One way of apparently incorporating ethnic minorities is to make them the butt of jokes in various ways, or to, as I put it, infantilise them, to make them non-serious people politically.
This is Mr. Spagoni.
Ah, Signor. Signor, I am disgusted to meet you.
Overtly, the joke is on the Italian in that he gets his English wrong. But subtly, too, the joke works back against the Australian in that it's quite an insulting thing to say.
Usually when a black character appeared in an early Australian film, it was very commonplace that a white actor would play the part in black face makeup. An early example is Trooper O'Brien. We have a young black tracker played by a white boy. It's so obvious he's got black face makeup on. And this continued throughout the 40s and 50s and through to the 60s even, with Ed Devereaux playing an Aborigine in Journey Out of Darkness.
How long is it since I sent in that application for an extra constable? Must be about 2 years, Sergeant.
Also in that film, we had Kamahl, the Sri Lankan singer, playing an Aborigine, an example of where the producers didn't use a real Aborigine. As far as the sidekick type faithful friend character, they were usually with names like Charcoal or Jackie, step and fetch roles, similar to Tonto roles, and Henry Murdoch was often playing Chips Rafferty's buddy, and always ever faithful.
Somebody did push him down, sir. Better get out of here before we get a bullet between the eyes.
Well, better we hurry, eh?
Or better we go slow. They're onto us, Dancer.
During the period 45 to about 50, there were a lot of things going on. Eureka Stockade, which again starred Chips Rafferty, had a very interesting Italian character.
But listen, I hear something else. Did you say our flag, Peter? Peter! Did you say our?
I did.
Great work! We march together again.
It was designed to legitimise the Australian post-war migration program by showing to the Australian people, after effectively 30 years of immense Anglophilia, that there had been a history of immigrants in Australia.
Charles Chauvel's production of Jeddah, made in 1955, was a real landmark film in that it was the first time Australian audiences were seeing Aborigines in lead roles. Rosie Kunoth played the lead, Jeddah, and Robert Tatawally played Marbuck. It was the first, you know, to star Aborigines. Robert Tatawally was praised by the press of the day for his, they explain it as sheer animal magnificence.
There is one interesting figure, Giorgio Mangiamelli, who came, an Italian, who came to Australia in the early 1950s. He made a series of short 16mm films dealing with the problem of Italian settlers. Mangiamelli hoped with 99% and a later film called Play to possibly appeal to the market, the developing art house market.
Please, what means my turn?
Your turn to shout.
Why I should shout?
Because I shouted you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you shout, me.
Well, when a bloke buys your beer, it's called a shout, see?
In fact, a lot of what John O'Grady tried to do with Weird Mob was define what us is. And indeed, a lot of the use of immigrants is about, or outsiders of any sort in mainstream production, is about defining us, not defining them.
But it was obviously written with such affection and with such mythology, if you like. I mean, it's a fantasy. Such things never happened. I don't know about the Italians. Maybe they thought it happening that way, though I doubt it. But from an Australian point of view, we were never like that. But we wanted to think of ourselves as being like that. It was the right book at the right time.
So the stereotypes are used as a means of, again, setting up the boundaries to our own behaviour. And I suppose in a subtext, instructing the newcomer on what it is that they will have to do in order to become part of us.
Isn't she wonderful, Mr. Hammond? No wonder Mrs. Gray wanted to have her taught.
Mrs. Gray was right. A talent like that should have its chance.
See, Moona, didn't I tell you? Dad would help you.
When I was 8 years old, watching Skippy, which was a very popular series in the 60s, and I remember one episode where an Aboriginal girl was found wandering through Waratah National Park, which is in fact just outside of Sydney. She was trying to escape her tribe. Sonny Hammond takes her home, and during the night she's tossing and turning in bed because she's being sung away by this old tribal man called Old One, because she was promised to him, to marry him. So she's lured away in the middle of the night. As an Aboriginal kid, I felt it was ridiculous to be spooked by this sort of representation. It was presenting Aboriginal traditional culture as something scary.
So the period up to the 1970s on Australian television, there's very little in the way of a non-Anglo presence.
I am a master of disguise, and you better believe it. Now I realize, that I was one of the few, or maybe the only one, with a foreign accent who actually came into a very well-known series, a very successful series, which changed the face of television, to come in and play a very major part. I don't know what to say.
Oh, say a prayer for me. I'll be saying plenty for you. Oh, and lighting candles, of course.
Stone the Flaming Crows, Marilyn. It's a hard life, My cousin Carmelita became a nun, and she told us all about it. The vow of silence, for instance.
What parents?
Those people come down here looking for him.
His parents are in here somewhere. Maybe. Those other people with their little black status symbol? Look at us. Look what we're doing for the niggers. Aren't we good, good people? Now, boy, we're really gonna forget that you're a nigger. You're white, just like the rest of us.
We're wondering when you and Christian were thinking of getting married.
Marriage? That's just what you'd say, isn't it? Chris and me don't need any white, reactionary, middle-class ideas like marriage. I spit on marriage. We've got a revolutionary relationship, pal.
It is an extraordinary piece of work in that it is their humour, it is their view of our view of them. And it is not bitter, it is not vicious, it is very sardonic.
In comedy, it tends to take a kind of stereotypical form. I'm thinking of series such as Kingswood Country and Home Sweet Home, both of whom have an Italian male as one of the central characters.
What is it you're not getting, Mr. Bocelli?
I'm not getting no honor, no respect, and my kids don't like me.
Oh, the question is why?
I know the question. What's the answer?
Let us ask ourselves, are we completely blameless?
I can only agree that Enzo Bocelli in Home Sweet Home is a stereotype. I feel sad about that, and if I were doing it now, I'd try to make him less of a one. But it doesn't mean that it was racist.
Well, I think Home Sweet Home was an example of a really misguided comedy. I mean, it's pretty funny. I mean, I laugh. Let me admit this. I do laugh at Home Sweet Home. I don't know why, because I can't stand it in some ways. I can't stand to see that my culture portrayed so wrongly. To me, all the family relationships are all wrong.
I reckon he'd get a job.
It's about two young men from Turkey trying to achieve their goals, and they came to the paradise, that's Australia. Everything turned gold in here. Whatever they touch will turn gold, with big hopes and everything. And one of them couldn't succeed because he's a weak person. The other one at least survived. After that, I couldn't do anything because the young people which I worked together with, like Esmond Storm and like Phil Noyes and Russell Boyd, because they're born in this country, they're all Australians and they're young and they have talents, and they are promising people. They're gone too far, but I stayed back.
White film producers have exploited Aboriginal culture in films in that often the heroic white figure has these same qualities, like what Paul Hogan has in Crocodile Dundee.
There are two main images that have been constructed about what it is to be an Australian, and one of them is that bush image, but the other one is the ochre image. Both of them are male, essentially. You know, the bush image is you know, the rugged male out there, and the ochre image is the rugged male in the city, is the urban version.
Once the dominant hero and point of identification has been established for a film, I think the subsidiary role of other groups represented through individual characters becomes almost inevitable.
I don't think it's particularly productive this far down the track to tell migrant stories which fall into the ain't it awful category.
No. No, my God.
Kathy?
He's gone. He's gone away and I don't know where she is.
Kathy? Kathy, what? What?
My baby has gone away.
Women of the Sun was an important series which dealt with Aboriginal society. It appeared in the early 80s, and I remember the first episode, which moved me a lot, called A Lint of the Flame, and it was the first time, I think, that Australian audiences, in like 30 years after the introduction of television, were finally seeing Aboriginal people speaking and acting in their own language.
If you take a crowd as a cross-section and you look at that crowd, there are very few that have the sandy hair, the freckles and the blue eyes.
I think in every street in Australia these days, you know, you just don't find a complete street of Anglo-Australians, do you? I mean, it's all a varied group of people.
There's no ethnics live on Ramsay Street, which is highly unlikely because there's bound to be at least one ethnic family.
Well, I mean, I am an Aboriginal Australian person, but not your Jason Donovan or your Peter Phelps type.
And I think definitely what is still helping me is that I've got that Australian look. And on the street, I'm one of the Australians, really, until I open my mouth.
Neighbors should be there for one another. That's when good neighbors become good friends.
I mean, I, as a viewer, when I can't relate to them, I look and I think, yes, I do know those people, but I don't know them in the way that they're represented. They're cleansed of all their complexity.
A recent series called The Flying Doctors, where Kylie Belling, an Aboriginal actress, was forced to reshoot a love scene with a white pilot.
Look, about last night, I'm sorry, I was an idiot.
I was the idiot, you weren't the idiot.
I was the idiot. Don't tell me I wasn't the idiot.
According to Kylie,
we were both idiots.
There was a scene which had to be reshot so that they didn't kiss. Also, there was another romantic incident in which a role for an Aboriginal character was given to a white actress.
The network involved with the Flying Doctors said any romantic attachment between an Aborigine and a European is offensive to the Australian public.
Because it's this cleansed, pretty version of what one might be in the ideal society that was not pluralist and didn't have any of the challenges of pluralism. particularly the issues of racism, the issues of discrimination, the issues of conflict, let alone the issues of celebration and joy.
We'll get in some Aboriginal children, and it's very rare that the child is picked. And it's never said, oh, that is because the child is Aborigine or anything. It's just the child is not picked.
I don't know how we solve that problem. It's part of the racism of Australia. But it is a fact that if I say, let's have an Aborigine, they'll practically fall on the floor and die, and the horror and the thought of it.
We know a great deal from social psychological studies of kids growing up that the images that are presented to them through the media are very important in terms of role identification, role modelling.
Like, people say that you are Australian, but then there's all these commercials that tell you, that show just Anglo-Australian looking kids, and you just don't feel like you belong anywhere.
Aussie kids, are we fixed kids? Aussie kids, are we fixed kids? Aussie kids, are we fixed kids?
Sometimes it puts us down, sort of, and it makes us wish like we want to be like them, because they always have fun and they always got good bodies, and you know, they're just energetic, and we're not sort of like that. We're not up to their standard.
Here's for a celebration.
You know, they've been brewing this for 100 years.
Australians like a party, and Australians like their beer. And Australia's favourite beer is Foster's. Flavour with a big capital F.
Italians can express their desire for good food and good wine and good living probably better than any nation on earth. And the Germans are probably perceived to be more practical than any nation on earth. So if you take that character and you apply it to your campaign, again, it's the borrowed credibility of the image of the nation.
Listen to what an expert has to say about Fab 2.
睇我兩個女，而家幾 nice and clean， but sometimes 佢哋好污糟 dirty。每一次我用 Fab 2洗嗰啲衫，真係好 clean and soft， 所以嗰啲污糟邋遢 ground in dirt， 一洗就甩。
In any ads that Italians or Chinese are seen in, they're always either cooking or working in a really low-grade job.
The people would think that us, like Asians and Greeks and Lebanese, we're really just inferior.
We are Asians, but we are also not only Chinese waiters or washerwomen who espouse a laundry detergent. We are also people who are scientists, who are teachers, who are doctors, and we are also your neighbours.
I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating about advertisers is that they're constantly claiming that they don't have social effects. But I mean, the whole point is that if they didn't, they wouldn't be able to sell products.
The OTC Memories campaign is in fact the most awarded advertising campaign in history. It's won every award there is to win in the business, and in fact was given the Australian Facts Hall of Fame award for the commercial of the decade.
What remains vivid in my memory is my husband struggling with a bunch of suitcases, my little child on my hands, and all of us being pushed up the stairway. And I remember always looking back and seeing my mother and father crying.
We sat down and said, for these ads to work, they must be very, very real. So we got hold of all our ethnics on staff, and we had many in this agency, some Germans, some Italians, some Yugoslavs, some Chinese, and we talked to them about their experiences, how they were missing their family, how they felt when they first came to Australia, and we recorded those. And we in fact used those actual recordings in the commercials. So they were real experiences. We didn't recreate anything.
It's not clear yet whether the minor changes that have taken place in advertising are actually going to modify one of the cruelest effects of Australian history on immigrants, which has been that their children have learnt to deny the validity of their parents' experience.
Like me, I look at a Chinese or a Vietnamese and I think, oh no, I don't want to be like them. They're just serving people, they're nothing, they're just there for people's enjoyment. And I feel really embarrassed and I think, I don't want to be one of them, I want to be an Australian. But then I ask myself, what's an Australian? I mean, do that really fit me, an Australian? I mean, I'm not blonde, do I have to go and dye my hair or something?
A Change of Face continues its look at ethnic stereotyping in Australian film and television next Thursday at the same time. Stay with us now for the first of this evening's movies, Rocking Silver from Denmark, the story of an ageing rock and roll band's attempt at a comeback.